Andiamo zitti la mano, perché lo stiamo facendo una balla, ma si vede che molla, mi sembra molla per sopra la si vuole la mattina, quando facciamo la mattina, cosa ci può la mattina.
Welcome back to Communicology. Today I'd like to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and that's the idea of intellectual curiosity. Sometimes it might just be known as inquisitiveness. And the basic idea of this is how willing are you to go and find things on your own? When you see things that maybe don't make sense, you go, I wonder why that is the way it is. Or if you see something that maybe you don't, that you just find really interesting, and you're like, I'd like to know more about that. It sounds like doesn't everybody have this? And surprisingly, no. One of the problems that we have is that, life comes along and we just find ourselves on cruise control for most of it. So that's what I want to talk about today, the idea of intellectual curiosity, and then something that goes along with it hand in hand, and that's the idea of intellectual humility. So we'll talk about that as well. So let's jump in and talk about them as we go. Now, as someone who's been an educator since 2004, it's one of those things that I'd like to try to foster in students. And it's one of those things that you have to understand that it's something that you do cultivate. Yes, some people are born with better minds than other people are. They're better thinkers, or they can understand some concepts a little bit better than others. They can reason better. Some people are more artistic. Some people are more logical. And that's one of those things that we kind of wrestle with. And intellectual curiosity doesn't live only in the world of reason. It could very much also live in the world of the artistic. So, maybe you even heard the term left brain, right brain. That's part of thinking about this a little bit too. If you you can hop online and take tests to find out whether you're left brain or right brain. But basically the idea is this: left brain, your left side of your head, when that gets working in that gray matter up there, the thoughts and things that go through, is a lot of where your logical work happens. And the right side is where your artistic work. Now, easy to remember that: left logical, use that L word, left and logical, and then right is artistic. So if you want to think of it that way, that's the best one I can come up with at the moment. But left logical, remember that. So if you have someone who's really good at math, that's over here. If you have someone who's really creative, that's over here. And again, when it comes down to those abilities, sure, they may have some innate natural abilities or proclivities towards one or the other, but how does that get then cultivated and fostered? I mean, you can throw seed on a ground, and some of it will sprout and some of it does not. But if you cultivate the ground and then do your seed and then do your watering, and then you pick out weeds and you further keep working at it, you'll get stuff to grow a lot better than just blindly casting seed. And if you're in a situation like I'm in every day, I'll have a classroom of students and I'll be throwing out information, and sometimes it lands on hard ground and sometimes it lands on cultivated ground. Now, how can I cultivate all the ground? Well, again, it'd be nice to say that I can and I have the secret to doing that, but the truth is you have to choose whether or not you cultivate your own mind, and then it's open then for other people then to cultivate it. So if you love learning, and those of you who are watching, if you do or not, like I just love learning, then you have this big, widely vast field that's been cultivated well, and people are throwing seed left and right and it's landing and you're just loving it. Then there are people who, love learning about specific things. Like, I'm going to learn about the things that matter to me. Well, those are areas that you've chosen to cultivate, and everything else is hard ground. And then there are the people who think, well, why do I need to learn? What's the sense? What's the point? And that's very hard ground. And those students are the hardest to work with because they just don't see a need. And that's very difficult. Now, where I see those students a lot of times, of course, like if I am teaching a first year class where I've got a bunch of students who don't understand the whole college process, or why do I have to take this class? I'll also see it in a situation where I have like maybe a business student or a biology student or an education student they're taking a communication class because it checks off some block in their general education requirements, and they know they have to take it to graduate, but they don't see a use, or they don't care because they want to focus on their major and they want to do that. And that's very much like a trade school type education. Just teach me the thing, and I'll be happy with the thing. Whereas a liberal arts education, you're going to learn about a lot of different things. So a liberal arts education is kind of a bit of a nightmare for people who only want to learn their thing, because I'll hear students time and time again complain and whine about all the other classes that they have to take to fill in their requirements, not thinking that this is a cool opportunity to learn and learn something I don't know. They're focused, I want to learn just my thing. Part of it, that's our fault in society, because we say go to college for your degree and only major in things that are market ready and market productive, instead of just saying go to college and learn, become a great thinker, and then you can go do whatever you want from there. That's the way the Greeks thought of it. Just go learn the basics and learn a broad scope of things and be as intellectually receptive as you can be. Then you can do whatever you want. We in America have refined it so much to be like trade schools, to where like you must learn a market ready job, and only those things, everything else is just fluff and a waste of time and not worth your time. So that's something we've done. But also part of it is that people sometimes have a hard time either understanding, or we have a hard time explaining, like why you should learn more, why you should care more. So to be an intellectually curious person, you need to be in a situation where I just like learning and it's a lot of fun. I'm the kind of person that when I'm flipping through the TV or flipping through social media, scrolling, whatever, and I'll stop and look at a bunch of different stuff. I've learned tons of different things, and you if you ever watch Jeopardy and you wonder like how these people, like they're just so smart, how like they must study all the time. It's like, no, you're just looking at people who are very much in tune with being intellectually curious. They just love learning. There may be columns that they ace because that's in their wheelhouse, but they have a broad knowledge about all kinds of stuff. I mean, when you go on Jeopardy, you don't know what they're going to pick so you can study those things. You just have to know stuff. Well, if you don't know a lot of stuff, you're going to do very poorly in Jeopardy. You're going to beg and plead and hope that they have your column, and then you can run it and make some money. But other than that, you're going to be sitting there looking like a fool throughout the rest of the show. So the person who's intellectually curious is actually genuinely interested in learning different kinds of things. It doesn't mean they have to be a master of everything. It just means that they need to be intellectually curious. They need to care to learn. They need to say, I've cultivated the ground in my mind. Let's cast some seed and let's see what grows. A lot of times when students get to college, they're focused on like, oh, I need to have a major. I need to have a major. And you're like, why? Well, when I was 16, I was told, you need to have a major. And they're always asked, well, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do with your life? It's like they're 16. They haven't had a chance to really understand much of what's going on in the world. I mean, they're literally only 16 years old. If you look at cognition starting around age 5 or so, I mean, they've only been thinking for 11 years tops. Like they don't have an idea what they're going to do till they're 72. And that's why most people, when they're in college, change their majors multiple times. It's why a lot of people, when they get out into the real world, they change their careers multiple times, because they're told at age 16, you need to know what you're going to do until you're 16 or until you're 72. You need to know this, and you just have to know it. So they feel this immense pressure when they come to college that they have to know. When in reality, no, you don't. You don't have to know. And in fact, I'll tell students, if a student comes in and says, I really don't know what I want to do, I'll say, that's okay. It's perfectly okay to come into college undeclared. Now, the people who don't like college will say, it's not a waste of time and money. No, it's not. Now, if you are someone who doesn't care about education, yeah, that would be a waste of money. Now, if you say, I love learning. I don't know what I want to do yet for a living, what I want to be in a major, but I just love learning and I want to learn more. welcome to college. What a great place to be. So I always recommend take a bunch of different classes. Open up the course book. Whenever they have the new semester rolls out and you see all the listings online, just look through them and say, that looks like a lot of fun. That looks interesting. I'm kind of curious about that. Take those classes and you'll find out real quick that, yes, those are really interesting. Or, oh gosh, it's not what I thought it was going to be. This actually turns out to be a disaster. I don't want to do that. But at least because there are a lot of students who they'll take college classes because they're afraid to change their major, or they've been told you'll always be this, or they're sometimes afraid to let go and realize they're not ready for that. And they'll get to like their junior year and they'll realize, I hate my major. What a terrible place to be. You're 3 years in and you now realize you don't like your major. What are you going to do now? So it's always good to take that broad, selection. And the other thing too is, again, if you're intellectually curious, that broad selection will be super appealing anyway. Like, I just took this art class and it was just fascinating. I took this history class and it was fascinating. I took this biology class and it was fascinating. I took this business class. It was fascinating. I mean, how many people have you ever heard say that? That just goes to show how rare intellectual curiosity is. Can you find a joy in learning anything? Can you find a need to learn anything? Now, people who are very pragmatic will say, why would you need to learn everything? And people who are really afraid of the process will say, gosh, it's not possible to learn anything, so I try. But the reality is if you can think and appreciate learning in this, and in this, and in this, and in this, and in this, you're going to be a much better, more well-rounded thinker. So it's not necessarily I need to prepare myself to be on Jeopardy. It's more of a matter of my mind, both left brain and right brain, are getting exercise. And they're picking up all these things. And in our world, we don't live in silos. We're all connected in all kinds of different ways. So when I go to the mechanic who's working on my car, I might not know all the fine details of everything, but I understand the process and what's going on. And if I go to the doctor for a checkup or because something's wrong, I may not know medicine, but I at least understand and can appreciate the process. Same with any other thing that goes on. My furnace breaks, or I go to the dentist, or I go to the barber. All of these different things, we're all connected in some certain kind of way. And if I can understand those connections, again, I don't have to master them. I just understand them. And life actually just starts becoming way more interesting and way more intriguing and mysterious and fun. Because if you're so pigeonholed to where you got that tunnel vision and you only want to see the things that really, truly you care about, that's your world. And what happens if something in that world changes, or that you decide you don't like that world anymore? All of a sudden you're in this vast nothingness, and everything you've been aiming for is gone and wasted. That happens. I mean, we've seen in the United States certain industries totally collapse. We've seen people be involved in a certain thing, and then that certain thing just disappears or breaks down, or you're focused on something and it just dissolves, and it's your heroes are gone, all that kind of fun stuff, and now you feel kind of hopeless, and what do I do now? So you think of like the person who's like the athlete, and they have an injury that's a career-ending injury. Now what? And they have nothing to fall back on because they've only ever thought about the one thing. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to have drive and to care about a subject. That's perfectly cool and normal. Communication is my thing. It's my drive. I care about it, and I learn as much as I can about it. So even in the field of communication, I'm what's known as a generalist when it comes to the way I teach, because I'll teach anything communication-based. It doesn't matter if it's interpersonal communication or group communication or public communication, or some kind of technological communication where I'm doing audio production or video production or graphic design, or I'm studying anything else that has to do in the whole field of communication, like specialty things like sports communication, health communication. You have all of these different things that are part of the field. Now, there are people who specialize very much on just a thing. More power to them, but the only problem is well, what if that thing changes? Like people who learn video production, like whenever I started, I was an audio video production major. audio was done mostly on tape. Video was done on tape. And you learned how to edit tape. And then the year I graduated, the industries went digital. 2/3 of what I learned went into the garbage bin. What do you do? But if you have a well-rounded education and care for the field and you're able to adapt because you like learning, you just move with it. No big deal. You say, okay, it went digital. Well, conveniently, I also am interested in the digital world. So I just take the information I had that still works. Lighting theory, that doesn't change, it's physics. Sound theory, that doesn't change, it's physics. The principles of framing and storytelling and all those other parts that make up videography and podcasting now. Like I used to train to be in radio. I worked in radio. Those days are gone. Like almost no one listens to radio stations anymore. Nearly nobody. But they listen to podcasting. And now you have not just podcasting, but you have video podcasting as well, obviously. But again, the way video podcasting is done, very few people sit and actually watch the video. So I'm fully aware that if you're tuning into this show, you might have it on and you're listening to it through your earbuds while driving or out walking or jogging or doing your dishes or the laundry or whatever you're doing. I doubt you're sitting there just staring at the television. And if you did, that's cool. I've got all these nice books. I'm wearing a nice shirt. I'm trying to do my hair. So I look at least remotely presentable. But, that's how the medium is understood, and that's how it's used. Now, I could try to make it more flashy. I could have all kinds of extra little flash and flare and graphics and other things piped into it. But if you're not watching, if you focus on listening, then you'd miss a lot of the information, and it would all of a sudden become disjointed. So again, because I've taken what I've known theoretically and just moved it out into the world where things used to be tape and now it's digital, and just I was able to pivot because I had that intellectual curiosity. So where we need to understand the next step is, and that's the concept of intellectual humility. And this is a hard one because we've got pride issues. Boy, do we have pride issues because we're human, right? And we don't like to admit that we're wrong, and we definitely don't like to admit we don't know something. I don't know probably has to be the most painful 3 words in the English language, and we just don't like saying I don't know because we feel like we're saying I'm stupid, and we don't like to do that. We like to pretend at least we know. But intellectual humility, especially if you're intellectually curious, you say, I love learning, which means there's a lot of stuff I don't know. But man, I can't wait to learn. Oh, I can't wait to learn it. That's a cool place to be. So if I have students, like when I first started teaching and students would say, well, how does this work, or what is this? And I didn't know. I'd try to find a way to meander my way into the answer. And now I just say, I don't know, let's look. And we look it up right then. It's like, cool, what a cool chance to learn. And I have that intellectual humility that I don't feel like I have to know more than everybody. I try to be prepared for my classes, but occasionally they throw a question your way that you just weren't expecting. And that's a good sign. I love it when my students are inquisitive and they ask me questions, especially if they stump me. I used to dread being stumped because I didn't want to admit I didn't know something. I'm the professor, I'm supposed to know. I'm at the point now, it's like, stump me. Ask questions, please. Let's learn together. And learning, once you realize that it is not just a personal thing, but it's also a community thing. Again, cultivating your mind, you have to do it yourself, but also you have to be willing to catch seed that's being thrown your way by some other farmer. You need to have that intellectual humility to say, I don't know. And that's okay. That's a good thing. As opposed to, I don't know and I'm embarrassed by that. That will always hold you back. Your pride and your false sense of shame. And I call it false because you can't know everything. So it's okay to not know something. So what we end up doing is coming in a situation where I don't know. And that's okay. Because I'd like to learn. The key thing is that secondary part. I'd like to learn. So if you have that intellectual curiosity, intellectual humility follows right with it. So the people who just who dread the humility part probably don't have much going in the curiosity part, because if you love learning, it's not that hard to say I don't know, because what a cool opportunity. I don't know. Here's a chance to learn something new. I mean, that's a huge difference between I don't know and I feel stupid versus here's a chance to learn something. That's cool. And one of the best things, whenever I'm asked, what do you love most about teaching? It's when that light turns on for the student, where they just get it. And they that mind has been cultivated, and all of a sudden a sprout goes boop and sticks up. And they get it. And that's a wonderful thing. So that's, when students start to say, man, I just love learning. I'd like to know more. That's always a good sign in the classroom. It's a great feeling to have as a professor, but it's even better to have as a person that you want to know more and that you get to work with other people and who want to know more. So a lot of times when I'm with my students, I'm trying to find out who wants to know more and who just hates learning. Because you'll find students in your classroom, they just don't want it. They're there because they have to. So I try to find the ones that really, really, really want to learn and try to push them even further. And I've sent numerous students off to grad school because they just loved learning. I've sent several off to get doctorates because they love learning. And it's because they had fertile ground and they were willing to let some farmer throw seed their way. So practice intellectual curiosity. Make sure your brain is tilled and ready to go. And then embrace intellectual humility. It's okay that you don't know everything. It's okay. Just use your chance to learn something new. So thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Always, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't like what you heard, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in anyway. But that's what I have for you today on Communicology.